What's going on, guys? Me and old Skip Dog back there. Y'all start to get to see him shortly. As it cools off, he can start going back with me. Me and old Skip Dog are about to go pick up my boys from school. And I recorded a video yesterday to put out that was, and it's going to be the subject of this, but then when I put it into the program, all the audio got messed up and I lost all the audio, so I figure we'll just do it in the truck this time. So I want to talk about redfish biology. Most importantly, like what makes a redfish a redfish. What's the life cycle of a redfish? So there's a lot of stuff going on right now of the topic getting brought back up about our redfish fishery in Georgia, you know, and our limits and our slot size. And you've got half the population saying that the slot needs to be, modified, and that the creel limit of 5 fish per day needs to be modified. And, you know, it's almost political in nature that, you know, you're either on one side or you're not. Or you're on one side or you're on the other. And you can't come back off of whatever side you're on. So it's just a piss and match back and forth, basically. So what I want to do is talk about the life cycle in this video of a redfish. You know, I think that education is key on making those decisions. A lot of people make those decisions just based off of what they see going out 1 or 2 times. And so what I want to do, this is a non-biased video. I'm not going to be biased in either way. I have my own personal opinions about, you know, the overall argument of each side. But what I want to do right now is just kind of go over a brief country boy, you know, overview life cycle of a redfish. So it starts with the breeders. The breeders are our bull redfish that live offshore. You know, they live offshore around the wrecks, and in September through November they come in to spawn. You know, and everything that I'm going to say in this video applies to the 90 percentile. There's always that 10% outlier. So if I say bull redfish come in, and you're going to sit here and say, well, you know, I just caught a 33-inch redfish in the back of a creek. Well, yeah, there's some residents that live in there year round, but the majority of those fish are offshore. So they come in to spawn. So the redfish are going to spawn from September to November. A redfish can lay up to 2,000 eggs, and she's going to spawn roughly every 5 to 7 days for that period. You know, but the spawn is limited. So redfish lays its eggs. The way a redfish lays its eggs is the males get together and start drumming. It attracts the females. The females come over. The males start rubbing on their bellies and causes the egg sac to release. So once that egg is released, it is carried by the tide into our estuaries. You know, and Georgia has the largest estuaries on the eastern coast. So Georgia has more marsh system, and an estuary system, than any other state on the east coast. So the tide carries these eggs. So the fish stays in the egg for a day. The fish comes out of the egg and it starts feeding on its yolk sac for 3 to 7 days. And then after that it feeds on zooplankton, which are your microorganisms that live in the water column. So the fish, the larva at that point in time, stays suspended in the water column for approximately 20 days. So as that is occurring, these fish are being pulled in and out of the tides. So that's how they're making their way into the back creeks. That's how they're making their way everywhere. So after about 20 days, these larvae are juvenile fish at this point, and they start getting into the grasses and these little kind of dead pockets and everything. And at that point, it's survival. You know, the only job at that point is for that juvenile fish to survive predators. So we've gone from egg to larva to juvenile. So those fish are, you know, feeding, growing, trying to survive. So, let's forward, so those fish are putting on the weight, they're growing. So at 1 year old, a typical redfish is going to be anywhere from, let's say, 10 to 16 inches. At year 2, they're going to be anywhere from 16 to 23 inches. At year 3, they're anywhere from 20 to 27 inches. You know, every fish is different. That's just a range of studies that I've read in the past. So the one thing that you need to know, and this is where a lot of things get misconstrued, is in Georgia, and I'm not going to be biased in this, our slot is 14 to 23 inches. So that year brood from the year before, you know, this time of year, we're September 24th, so that year brood from the year before is just getting of legal limit. They're just getting into the slot. They're schooled up, they're feeding heavily, putting on weight. That's their main goal, is survive and put on weight. So they're eating, you know, and as soon as they hit slot, they're very vulnerable because they're schooled up. You know, they're putting on the feed bags, they're very easy to catch. So that's when they become susceptible to us. So let's backtrack a second. And so what affects a year class? So what affects the number of fish that go from egg to a juvenile fish that we're able to catch? So there are factors in the way of the brood. You know, it starts with the females coming in. So how many females came in, how was the reproductive, you know, how many eggs were laid, everything. So as those eggs get dispensed into the water, other factors: runoff, freshwater intrusion, cold fronts. Was the tide right at the time that those eggs were laid to distribute them to the estuary? Sufficient microorganisms in the water for the larvae and juvenile fish to eat on. As they get bigger, is there sufficient smaller fish and organisms for them to eat on? Predators, are they in an area that has a lot of dolphin, a lot of flounder, a lot of other fish that just hammer these little juvenile redfish? You know, so for a redfish to get to our slot of 14 to 23, they've already had a dang hard road in front of them. You know, so I mean, it's like having a baby. You know, when you sit there and you think about us having a baby, we kind of take it for granted, but it's all, I mean, it's a flat out miracle. Everything has to go right. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong, and it only takes one, and it doesn't happen, you know. So for those fish to get to our slot, it's a miracle. So that's the cycle, you know. And then as that cycle, so how do you repeat the cycle the next year? You know, a redfish, the I guess the well accepted age of a redfish life expectancy is, say, 40 years. You know, so it takes a female roughly is at age 3 when she can first produce eggs and spawn. So she is well outside of our slot. At that time, she's roughly 27 inches long. You know, so a female redfish has to come all the way through juvenile, all the way through our slot before she ever has a chance to spawn. You know, so as that reproductive class offshore, is that population steady? Is it dwindling? You know, all that is the initial thing that we actually have the ability to control. We can't control cold fronts. We can't control when that fish decides to lay her eggs and spawn, you know, so that the tide can carry it to the right place. That's all stuff we can't control. You know, we do have some control over pollutant runoff and stuff like that to an extent that, you know, CRD, EPD, and stuff like them are in charge of, you know, but it still happens. You know, we can control development to an extent, but you're not going to stop it, so you can't control that. So you have to look at the factors of redfish success, and what are those factors that you can control. So when you get to the overall cycle of things, the reproductive cycle and maintaining a fishery, the only real thing that we can control is making sure that those breeders that are offshore are being established. So, you know, if you look at the recruitment rates in Georgia, which is a recruitment rate is basically a ratio of spawning fish. So from like how many juvenile fish were you able to raise off of that spawn is basically the term of a recruitment rate. And I'll show a graph of the recruitment rate. And you can see that it varies from year to year. It's very seasonal. But the overall trend line for Georgia is down. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, you have to think to yourself. And like I said, I'm not going to be biased on this. Okay, my camera cut off for overheating. But so we were talking about the things that we can control. So the only thing that we can control is making sure that that reproductive class that lives offshore that comes in and spawns is being replenished. So if we know that a redfish can't spawn, a female redfish can't spawn until she's roughly at age 3 and roughly 27 inches, so we know that she has to go all the way through our slot. So if you're sitting there fishing a school and you sit there and the guy behind you sits there and you know 5 boats in a row sit there and they catch a boat limit of trout, a boat limit of redfish, then it doesn't take long to deplenish that school, that year brood of school, to where there's no females left to go offshore to become the next breeding class. You know, so that's the thing, and that's why redfish is hard to it's hard to put into words how big of a deal this is, I guess, and the repercussions from kind of our limits and our slots, in my opinion, because that class is out there. So say those fish are out there for 37 years spawning. So it may take a decade, 2 decades for us to see the implications of what we're doing today. You know, as is that line going to continue to dwindle? Are there enough breeders making it offshore to where we're maintaining sustainability of the class? You know, that's all stuff that is supposed to be surveyed and studied, but it ain't like we can go out there and hand count every single breeder and say, okay, you're doing good, you're doing good. You know, we kind of have to, it's a guesstimate. It's the best guesstimate. But that's kind of it. That's the life cycle. That's it. So I want y'all to understand that, put that into your mind, and think about it as the next time you're sitting there. And I'll try to separate my views in this video from another video that I'll put out to where I give my opinion on it. So I hope y'all have a great day. I'm going to go pick up my little rascals. And I got a hole in the boat that I get to fix this weekend. So I'm off the water until I can get that fixed. So I'll try to video some of that so y'all can hang around for it. But hope y'all have a good one. Hope y'all learned something. You know, feel free to ask any comment or ask any questions in the comments below. Let's try to keep the political nature out of it. You know, I don't care what side you're on. You know, just this whole goal is to understand. I just want y'all to understand, you know, what's going on. We overheated again. So like I said, I just hope that in this video y'all were able to learn something. You know, let's keep the politics out of it, whatever side of the equation you're on. Just think about it from a big picture. You know, think about if you're sitting there at the mouth of a creek on a school and you're just loading the boat with them, you know, just keep it in mind. You know, the law's the law. If you're following the laws, there's nothing I can say about it. That is what they are. You know, I just think that everybody needs to be educated on what's going on and how a redfish becomes a redfish, and then they can make their own informed decision, you know, and self-regulate if they choose to. But I hope y'all learned something, and I hope y'all have a great day.